concern is growing that Matt Hancock's actions will have a nationwide impact and open the floodgates to mass rule breaking before the lockdown restrictions are lifted on the 19th of July.
Behavioural scientists fear the weekend's event could have a similar effect to last year when researchers in University College London asked respondents to rate their confidence in the government's handling of the pandemic.
Public confidence sharply dropped on May the 22nd following news that Dominic Cummings, senior aide to the Prime Minister, had broken lockdown rules. Well, joining us now to discuss this is COVID bereavement campaigner Jean Adamson, whose father died in a care home. Professor of Social Psychology at the University of Sussex, John Drury, who is a member of the SAGE Committee, which advises the government on behavioural science, A&E Dr Salia Ahsan, and business owner Michaela Wayne. Good morning, and thank you to all of you for joining us this morning. Jean Adamson, when you have lost your own family member, what does it feel like when you see the government minister, the health secretary, breaking the rules that have applied to everyone over the course of the pandemic?
It feels very, very insulting. It's disappointing, and it just shows a complete lack of regard for the people. It's just sickening. Absolutely sickening.
He, of course, has resigned because he felt that he couldn't carry on, focus on what he needed to do, and he apologised for breaking social distancing guidance. But having lost somebody who caught COVID during the pandemic, are there other occasions where you think he should have gone as Health Secretary?
Yes, I do, because, of course, this is not the only misdemeanour that we've been made aware of. This has been going on, you know, these kind of misdemeanours have been going on for a long time. And throughout the course of the pandemic, the Health Secretary, or the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has presided over numerous catastrophes and disasters over the last year. So we had, for example, the issue about hospital discharges into care homes. We've had the test and trace disaster. You know, we've had a number of areas. I mean, it's just lurching from one crisis to another. So it's, you know, this is not the first time. And then there was a Dominic Cummings affair as well. And the lies and the hypocrisy, the deceit and lack of transparency, it's just been absolutely horrendous. And as bereaved families...
And this was the final straw, I can imagine. Professor John
Yes.
Drury, in terms of our social psychology, because that's what you're the expert in, and our behaviour, you know, as Jean says, the Dominic Cummings incident obviously made people lose trust in the government and led to people probably saying, well, the rules don't apply to him, so they shouldn't apply to me. What do you think the Matt Hancock affair, what effect will that have on people's behaviour? We're only a couple of weeks away from the lockdown lifting altogether, but I mean, in your county, in Sussex, we saw the rave over the weekend. Do people already say, do you think, well, the rules don't apply to me then?
Well, there are three things to say in response to this. The first is that the research across the course of the pandemic has shown that other people's behaviour is a major predictor of what we do, as is trust in the government. And both of these things are implicated in what's happened with Matt Hancock. So the more that we trust the government, the more likely we are to adhere to the rules, to distance, to wear masks, to get vaccinated and so on. The Cummings incident actually was quite complicated in its effects because, as you said, there was a loss of trust. And if you remember, it came after a period of sustained sense of national togetherness, and that togetherness was already on the wane. And I think the Cummings affair paid to that. But it had a complex effect in that some people said, well, why should the rules apply to me? But others said, I don't want to be like Cummings. And the study you described at the beginning found evidence that some people continued to adhere, wanted to adhere because they didn't want to be like Cummings. It's also worth saying that there were a number of other issues going on with the government at the time that led to that decline in adherence around May and June. And the first was the change in the messaging, because they changed, if you remember, from stay at home to stay alert, and stay alert was a bit more vague about what it means. And then there was the celebration around Freedom Day, lots of coverage in the paper that the rules were going to be abandoned, that lockdown was going to finish. And in anticipation of that, people did stop adhering quite as much.
We're going to speak to representatives of the business community in just a moment. But before that, Dr. Salih Ahsan, I just want to ask you, you've been personally affected by this. You lost your father to COVID, but you also work in A&E. And I wonder how you felt on behalf of everybody in the NHS about what your boss, ultimately the Health Secretary, did.
Yeah, Susanna, hi. I spent all last year working in intensive care, actually, working with extremely sick people. We lost many patients. We were running two battles, one to save lives, but also to keep reinforcing to the public that there are things that they can do to mitigate the risk. The distancing, the wearing the mask, the getting vaccinated. I feel utterly heartbroken. I went to visit my father's grave yesterday and stood there and contemplated and reflected on how I couldn't even find my father's grave because the place has been transformed with the number of people who have passed away, many of them to COVID, in the cemetery. I'm utterly heartbroken, and he shouldn't have resigned. He should have been sacked, frankly, because if you don't sack him, are they in some way condoning this behaviour? And we haven't even got to the inquiry yet. How much more is going to come out? I don't think I can stomach this.
I'd just like to ask the Professor, if I can go back. I mean, clearly passions are high over this. Do you think there is any mitigating factor in people's behaviour over the fact that Matt Hancock did eventually resign, or was it too late to stop the damage?
Well, this situation is different than the Cummings affair, because Cummings didn't resign, if you remember, at the time. He was defended by the government, and that was part of the damage. I mean, the other issue is that sense of togetherness we might have felt. I mean, the ratings for the government's performance were pretty high. They've been high due to the vaccination programme, but that's the only thing. I mean, other than that, that sense of togetherness the public might feel with them is not there. I mean, adherence has already, levels of adherence have already been slightly declining with the change in the rules and the anticipation of the end of lockdown. So I'm not sure how much impact this will have given the situation we're in.
I have to say, from my experience, I walked through a shopping centre yesterday and there was probably 20% of people wore masks. We were indoors and therefore the regulations say you should. So I think adherence has gone. Michaela, you run a business. Obviously, lockdown hurts businesses right across the country. And there's changes coming the end of this week. Business relief for retailers and hospitality firms is going on the 1st of July. The furlough contribution for people who have staff on furlough will be increasing by 10% as employers need to put more money in and the government puts less money in, even though we're still in the lockdown. Clearly, the medical issues are big, but also lockdown has its own effect on business and people's livelihoods, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. To be honest, after this weekend, I'm furious. I'm looking around at my office where I can only have half of the staff in there because of social distancing. And we're sticking to all these rules through fear, nothing else, because to be honest, I'm over this pandemic, but through fear of what might happen and any laws that we'll be breaking if we don't. And all the while, the person who's written these laws and implemented all these rules and forced them upon us is seen as receptionist or whatever she was, is the NED of a board. Like, is this a joke? I can't stand next to my colleague, but he's got his tongue down somebody's throat. I'm absolutely livid. My company has gone from 100% turnover to 5% at times. I've had to take out loans and mortgages, and I feel like I am left to fund this pandemic while the government tells us what to do and just does whatever they want.
But does his resignation not make up for that? He has lost his ministerial position. Does it not help in any way to the way you feel? Look at all the shaking heads there.
Not at all. No, he should have been fired. Just as the lady before said, he should have been fired. It should have been a point to prove that there are consequences for the government as well, not just for business owners or the general public. They need to have consequences for their actions as well. Lead by example.
Look, we appreciate, I mean, it's devastating. Each of your testimony, for different reasons, is devastating for the government and the loss of trust. And we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us. We put it out to Twitter. Have you lost trust in the government? More than 45,000 votes, and 86% say they have now lost trust in the government in the wake of what happened with Matt Hancock.